We are going live to Zoom, and we are going to wait one more minute. I see that people are still joining us. If in the chat you would like to put in where you're from, and if you have any questions about artificial intelligence, machine learning, you're at the right place. So we are streaming, everything's good, and okay, I don't need that there anymore. Okay. All right. On that note, it is, one second here, is gallery view. Let me try this. Okay. It is Widen Your Gaze Fridays. Welcome one and all to today's presentation. I'm really excited about my guest speaker, Russell Douglas, who's coming to us from Texas today. And our topic is facts and myths about artificial intelligence. Russell Douglas has his own company, ePrethum Solutions, and he has a very extensive background in machine learning and supply chain management. And just to let you know that actually Russell and I work together on a regular basis. He is a client of mine, and it is, I would say, the highlight of my week is when we meet. It's just so enjoyable and whatnot. I can see that other people are joining us. Scott, Simha, good to see you. And we're going to get going into this. So without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone, or the pseudo microphone, over to Russell. Russell, welcome to Widen Your Gaze.
Hello, everybody. So what I'm going to preface my talk today was that we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, but we're going to, I don't want to assume that everybody knows what it is. So I'm going to just talk about the very basics of artificial intelligence, some of the history behind artificial intelligence, and then some of the myths. And when I say myths, we're really talking about machines like Star Trek's Data, Arnold's Terminator 2. Terminator 1 is closer to what we actually could do today if we wanted to. Will Smith's iRobot, and thinking machines. And so, and to go into some of that and then talking about, can we really do that today? What are the limitations and what do we know? So in order to do that, we have to talk about the brain a little bit and what we know about that. So with that, the agenda is what we're going to talk about. Who are the founders of AI? What is AI from a high level explanation? What are the types? What is machine learning? And some brain basics, as I said. And then, of course, a conclusion and questions and answers for you guys. I want this to be an open discussion. I'm going to try to watch the question and answer board, but I may have to depend on Luke to let me know when there's a question.
I will. Yep. I'll modify that. Yep.
So he'll break in on me. So I don't mean to just blast everybody with this stuff. I'm going to, again, we're going to talk about some of the history, and we're going to talk about the history, even of some of the members, or even some of the foundations, because there's history behind them that give them the money for this first meeting. So before we define AI, we want to talk about, well, where did the words AI come from? And so there was a guy named John McCarthy who was a cognitive scientist. He was a mathematician and a biologist and a few other things. He's a self-taught mathematician, and they started thinking about thinking machines really in the 50s, or maybe even before that. And he's the one who coined the term in 1955, and they had at the first AI conference in 1956. And AI really was a term that he didn't want to call it cognitive functioning or anything like that, because there was actually politics around that. There are other scientists that already had coined that. So he wanted to come up with a term that didn't have any baggage surrounding it, so he wouldn't get into arguments about, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? So he could completely define it. So artificial intelligence is how that came about. What's interesting is that John went to the Rockefeller Foundation to ask for the money to put this conference together. and the first meeting was not at Carnegie Mellon, but one of the conferences that they had later. One of the labs, they said it was at Carnegie Mellon. So I don't know how many of you know the relationship between Rockefeller and J.D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. Them, and along with J.P. Morgan, at the turn of the 20th century, they were actually competitors. And they were fierce competitors, and they didn't really care about the things that happened about them. So J.P. Morgan, you should know that Edison Electric, which he basically took from Edison and created GE from it. And so big companies came from that. And Rockefeller's oil company was broken into, some of the famous oil companies that we know. But these two competed for a long time, and then JP Morgan died. So Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller decided that they wanted to give away the bulk of what they had made in their lifetime. So even in this, the relationship between the two of them helped support AI, and that's really the point here. And I thought that was interesting. So maybe I'm the only one, I don't know.
No, I think that's those roots of them and where that comes from, right? Because I'm surprised that it even goes back that far. I think it's more like artificial intelligence wouldn't go back, 70 years now? It would be something more contemporary.
And yes, and we're going to talk about another guy named Turing that actually was thinking about this before any of these guys were, and before this conference. He died a little bit before this conference in 1956, and we're going to talk about him. Luke and I have a story about him that we will share when we get to the Turing thing. So these folks, we talked about John. There was also Marvin Minsky, Alan Newell, and Herbert Simon were the people that stayed the entire time in the 12-week process. I'm going to send this presentation to Luke, and all 12 attendees and how long they stayed are going to be in the notes section. And so, but these were the guys that later on, after the conference in 1956, and we're going to see how they defined AI later, that co-founded the laboratories at Carnegie Mellon and at MIT laboratories. And note that Herbert, Simon rather, was also a Nobel Prize winner for economics in 1978. So this is how they defined it. So in the highlights here, I'm just going to turn on my laser pointer. There is the exact definition that they came up with, and I thought I'd put that up there. It's kind of cryptic, but this is the way that computer engineers thought about this back then. But the explanation really is underneath. What they were trying to get, what they thought about artificial intelligence and building a machine or a computer that could think in abstract, solve problems, and did self-improvement all on its own. And the irony is they never even made it that far, and we're not that far today. And I'll explain why that's true in a minute. So we've got a little video that we're going to watch.
And you're going to ensure that you have automated the video feed in the auditory, right?
Yeah, I turned it on last time, so hopefully everything will work as designed. We'll see.
I'll let you know if it's not coming through.
Is it working?
Sometimes, yes. Can AI replace humans?
Yes.
Sometimes, yes. Siri, Alexa, Cortana, and Google Assistant. These are all forms of AI or artificial intelligence, but AI extends far past voice-activated assistants. AI is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines, especially computer systems, and almost all businesses today employ some type of AI, some more complicated than others. AI can be categorized as weak or strong. Weak AI is a system designed and trained for a particular task, like voice-activated assistance. It can maybe answer your question or obey a programmed command, but can't work without human interaction. Strong AI is an AI system with generalized human cognitive abilities, meaning it can solve tasks and find solutions without human intervention. A self-driving car is an example of strong AI that uses a combination of computer vision, image recognition, and deep learning to pilot a vehicle while staying in a given lane and avoiding unexpected obstacles, like pedestrians. AI has made its way into a variety of industries that benefit both businesses and consumers, like healthcare, education, finance, law, and manufacturing. In fact, many technologies incorporate AI, including automation, machine learning, machine vision, natural language processing, and robotics. The application of AI raises legal, ethical, and security concerns. For instance, if an autonomous vehicle is involved in an accident, liability is unclear. And hackers are using sophisticated machine learning tools to gain access to sensitive systems. Despite the risks, there's very few regulations governing the use of AI tools, but experts assure that AI will simply improve products and services and won't replace us humans anytime soon.
So if there's any questions I need to deal with, Luke, let me know.
Yep, I'm watching.
So that was a simplified explanation. I don't know that I quite agree with a strong AI being an autonomous car, because still under what they mean by strong.
Hi, everyone. Let's get started.
Uh-oh.
Good afternoon.
Sorry about this. Strong AI is really where a machine can accomplish multiple different tasks. And so even though it seems like the car being able to turn, recognize people, and all that kind of stuff for multiple different tasks, but it has one function: to drive a car and get to a destination. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear. And we know, ethical issue-wise, they still haven't worked that out. I think it was Tesla that ran into the bicycle person and killed them. And I don't know how that was resolved. And so, yeah, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. So the types of AI are machine learning, which you heard her talk about, and computer vision. And so machine learning, we'll talk about that a little bit more because we're talking about the way Facebook works and the way Google search works. Computer vision on my iPhone, mine does the face recognition thing. It's pretty good at that. Natural language processing, Alexa, Siri, and some others can do that. And so artificial neural networks, most people don't say that, they just say neural networks, are great with deep learning and pattern recognition. And so again, that's really the Facebook, Google thing, and a lot of what Amazon does when they pattern match you to upsell and cross-sell. So also in that conference, this is what they characterized AI in 1956 as automatic computers. We can do that today. And Siri, Alexa have already proved that we can program it to use language. Neuron nets. And so we can't do that today. And that's for a computer by itself to form concepts. We can't do that today. And we're going to talk about brain in a little bit to figure out the long and short of it is we don't even know how that works in the human brain. So how can we program it? Theory and size of calculations, we've mastered math in all forms and in physics, and whether it's macro space, which is in atoms, or macular space, which is our universe. Self-improvement, we're not there yet. Abstractions, again, we don't know how any of this stuff works. And then randomness and creativity on its own, things like that.
We do have a question when you're ready for it.
Okay.
Wow, pardon me. Okay, Simha is wondering, he's asked questions. Define machine learning versus and deep learning.
Yeah, well, we're going to get there. I'll remind me when we get.
Yep, we'll cover it. Yep. Yep. SIMA's usually ahead of the curve on us, so it's always good that way.
So one of the ways that Turing thought about this test was when you can't see it and you don't know whether you're talking to a machine or you're talking to a person. And so this is something about the Turing test.
Will computers ever be smarter than humans? And if so, when will we know? To answer the latter, researchers once turned to the Turing test, named after its founder, the British computer scientist Alan Turing. The test was first introduced in 1950 to gauge if a computer is capable of mimicking human intelligence under specific conditions. To conduct the Turing test, researchers set up 3 separate terminals. One terminal operated by a computer and 2 operated by humans. For the actual test, one human blindly questioned both the computer and the other human in a specific subject area, and then had to discern which answers came from which. This was repeated multiple times, and if the questioner could not correctly distinguish the human's responses from the computer's more than half the time, the computer was considered to have artificial intelligence. Of course, that seems so simple by today's standards. Advances in conversational AI combined with the limited field of a specific subject matter made this version of the Turing test largely irrelevant. So today, we have spin-off tests intended to be more effective in determining true AI. These include the Marcus test, which measures the computer's comprehension of a TV show, and the Lovelace test 2.0, which gauges a computer's ability to create art. And in a true sign of the times, there's also the reverse Turing test, which makes a human prove to a computer that he or she is not a computer. Examples include CAPTCHA systems that ask a person to check a box if they are not a robot, or to correctly identify a series of squiggly letters and numbers.
So a lot of you have already run across the test to prove that you are human by those squiggly things when you register for something online. Typically, we have it on our website. A lot of people, when you're paying, especially where money's involved, they have you do that. Or you're signing up to, as if you get some kind of free book or whatever. And so and that's what they use. So as we talked about, Alan was a British mathematician. And he is primarily responsible for multi-purpose computers, laptops that we did today. Back in those days, machines had a single purpose and what they did. And that's been true for a long time until we got a laptop. Can do many different things because software can do many different things. And you have many different softwares to run on your computer. Alan was a genius, but unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to really realize his genius. He was the one primarily responsible for the Nazi code breaking. And I think there's a movie about him that Luke will tell you about that that broke the code in World War II, but he was gay. And so in Britain, back in those days, being gay was a crime. So what happened to him, he could take medical castration, which is a chemical castration rather, or be thrown in jail. And he took the chemical castration. And then a few years later, he committed suicide. And so he never made it to this conference that we were talking about because he died in 1954. And I can't imagine what other contributions he would have given us.
And you would know him from the movie Imagination Game, where Benedict Cumberbatch played him. It's a great movie, really good movie. And so, yeah, it details how this police officer had an agenda to get him, and eventually they found that he was gay, and then everything on that. But yeah, it's a great story, and it's really sad that he didn't offer more or was given the opportunity.
So I don't remember when they started the Turing Award, but it's an award given to the scientist or person who makes the most advance for AI in that year. So it's an annual award, like the Nobel Prize, and you can look it up, and who's won the award.
Yeah,
And so another thing is about most people did not know who he was because his work was classified for so many years after he was dead.
Sylvie has a question, Russell.
well, it was more like an add-on comment. In 2020, at the onset of the year, that prize was won by Yoshua Benjo, who's from Montreal, who's kind of right now, the Canadian guru of AI, teaches at Université de Montréal, founder of Mila, does a lot of research. A big chunk of his focus is not only on the actual technology, but also on all the elements surrounding the ethics.
Oh,
Yes, yes, yes. And Montreal created, I think it's Montreal ethics, something related to AI. And again, this was all prior to the pandemic. But we were, when I say we, Montreal and the folks belonging to this community, including Yoshua Benjo and others, were pushing the agenda strong enough that we were starting to get worldwide visibility, because a lot of governments are unsure as to how do you manage the ethics of all of this, the building of the algorithm. What are you able to divulge to explain the algorithm versus what you can't because of privacy issues? So Yoshua Benjo, a lot of his work is on the tech, but also on the ethics side of it, because that is really a concern for him. And he's quite close to both governments, federal and provincial, in trying to get our politicians to have a little bit of basic comprehension before they start regulating the whole aspect.
right. And it's so typical that government is always catching up behind, like they're not catching up to science and technology, right? And the biggest one of the things we're seeing right now is drones, like drone airplanes and that kind of stuff, right? And they're finally passing laws to do so you can take a $30 drone and take down a jet liner, whatnot.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you for that input, Sylvie. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, very interesting. But I will, when I first started looking at AI, I was actually looking at AI in governments, and I was looking, and Canada is ahead of the US when it comes to putting AI into practice as far as governments are concerned. And I just thought that was interesting. We're behind most countries in terms of governments, but in our business industries is where we're ahead and where the ethical issues are. And we're going to talk about some of those ethical issues, actually, and I'm going to make some recommendations.
And I know what that one recommendation is going to be.
You do.
Yeah.
So what is machine learning? So and I'm going to keep this at the basic level. There are two types of machine learning. There's supervised and unsupervised. And where there's supervised, there's different types of supervised, but I want to get down to that level of doing supervised learning. So supervised learning basically is where the scientist tells the machine, or not the machine, the algorithm, what's a right answer and what's a wrong answer. One example that I like to use is that when I was practicing on IBM stuff, I could tell, I forgot what their algorithm is for visual recognition, but I could show it 4 or 5 hamburgers, but I have to label them: hamburger, hamburger, hamburger. And then I would show it a hamburger it had never seen before and go, that's a hamburger. And so unsupervised learning is different altogether. Is I don't tell the machine what the answer is. I show it a bunch of data. It observes patterns in the data. And one of the popular uses of this, think of Amazon. And if you buy this product, it if you're going to buy this product, you may think about that product. So that's supervised and unsupervised. And remember, there are subcategories of each of these things, but just keeping it at a base level. So I believe that's the answer to the question that was asked earlier.
And the questions were about machine learning and deep learning.
Yeah, so unsupervised is deep learning.
Simha, did that answer the question, or you have a follow-up? Big thumbs up from Simha. You're good to go.
So, so when we characterize these thinking machines, we have to know about the brain. So obviously the brain, we couldn't go into the context here, and we could do, there are thousands of people everywhere that study the brain in its infinite detail, and how stuff works. In general, you have the cortex, which is all the thinking part of your brain. Then you have the brainstem, which is the automatic processes. Also in there is when you get afraid and you got to decide whether you're going to fight or run, that kind of thing. That's all automatic. And then, so I just wanted to cover the brain from that perspective. And then what do we know? We know more about the brain in the last 10 years than we have in the hundreds of years we've been looking at it. In the last 10 years, because we've been able to image the brain and to watch certain features when we're testing people, we generally know where stuff happens in the brain. We know what the different properties of the brain are. We know that basically each person has 1 billion neurons, and each neuron has over 10,000 or up to 10,000 synapses. And I meant to take axioms out. I just forgot to do that because there are things on the synapses and the axioms that happen there that makes it more complicated. So I didn't want to get into all that, but just think of axiom as the output. And so we thought for many, many years that the brain was just about electricity, but what we found out is the messaging is really about its chemical reaction and not electricity at all. The brain, when the brain processes something, it doesn't do it in a central location. It happens across the brain. And the same stimulus may be processed across the brain somewhere else. We know that language basically is on the left brain, and the right brain is abstract and reasoning. I did a Myers-Briggs some years ago, and I was even-brained, whatever that means. And they generally say that women are more left brain and men are more right brain. They also say that when it comes to a detailed event, when it comes to an event, let me say it this way, a woman will remember the details of something that happened that was emotional to her, and to the man in the same event only remembers the gist. And so is why, when there's arguments over a particular subject matter, is that in his brain, he says, I know what happened. Here's what happened. And when the woman will say, you missed this, this, and that, so you have no idea what happened, but it's just that we remember differently and information stored differently. We don't know why that's true. But there are other things that we know exactly how it works. It's like a magician knows how to trick you because he understands how the brain works. So he has you looking one way when you should be looking right. But in greater detail, I would ask you and everybody on here to watch The Great Hack. And that's the story about Cambridge Analytica as the first Netflix thing to watch. And they will show you how they understand how to manipulate human beings with this data, and how Cambridge Analytica became under fire by a professor who just wanted his information back. And he wanted to know how the algorithms produced it. The problem is the algorithms that Cambridge Analytica used were created by the CIA. So he never got any of that back. None of that happened. And we don't know what the algorithms are today. That Cambridge Analytica was shut down. We don't know what they are. And we will never know what these algorithms are. It's a fascinating documentary. At the same time,
this is like conspiracy theory stuff.
It is. And how Cambridge Analytica got it, to me, is really the interesting thing. The social dilemma is the other one. And so the social dilemma is about Facebook and any social media, and about Google search and how it works, and likes and all that kind of stuff, talked about the people who created these things. I was stunned, to say the least. And what they're doing now is, because they have a basic understanding about how the brain works and how it can be misdirected, or how it can be, what's the right words here? Luke, help me here. Manipulated. Is that a good word from Social Dilemma? Manipulated?
I'm sorry, I was trying to turn on my microphone. I was muted. Yeah, influenced, manipulated, manipulated.
Yeah,
How we're manipulated, and it is intentional to get us to have more screen time, pay attention more. It acts on the pleasure center of the brain, and they figured out how to have that. So we're talking about dopamine, serotonin, that kind of stuff that is actually reinforced with it. So yeah, if you want to have a cold shot of reality, even if you don't want to have a cold shot of reality, watch The Social Dilemma. Yeah.
So watch The Great Hack and Social Dilemma. And to me, these things are much scarier than a robot walking around like Data, or like iRobot, or like, well, I don't know about Terminator. That would be bad too. So, but those two things will show you the depth of what we know about the brain, and then how we use what we know to manipulate it.
And just the other thing I want to say with that is that they're actually interviewing the people that developed this. And one of the things they say is that you have a dozen guys in Silicon Valley that is now influencing all of us, because they didn't know what they're doing. They didn't know the implications of what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. They didn't know that likes, not a 13-year-old girl not getting enough likes would cause you to commit suicide.
Yep.
And those realities is that they inherently weren't built for bad things, but these are things that are implications of what's happening, and things we should all be thinking about. If it wasn't for my grandkids, I would have shut my Facebook down right after I saw that, to be quite honest. So here's what we don't know about the brain. And this is just this is not complete detail again, is that, so the cross wiring, where the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, and the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. We know that circuitry crosses over. We don't have any idea why. We don't know how information is encoded. We don't know how memories are stored or retrieved. We don't know what a baseline activity is for any single brain, or how it's represented in the brain, or how brains simulate the future. For example, Luke and I were talking earlier, we were scheduling a meeting for next week. We're trying to decide what should be Tuesday or Wednesday. We don't know how that works. It's just something that we do. And so I can think in my head, I know exactly what Wednesday is and exactly what Tuesday is, but how do I code that? And some of the problems is that most of the guys you saw earlier are engineers, and a lot of them are not working with neurologists that understand the brain. And there's probably some conflict there too, because they're saying, we don't know how these things work. How can we code it? There is a paper that was written in 2007, that I'll send also to Luke. There's a guy who's taken an alternate approach. He's taking an approach from AI from a neurologist perspective, and not from an engineer's perspective. And it's 100 and some pages, like a book. So I don't find that stuff fascinating reading. So you just may want to skim it like I did.
One of the other things I remember taking psychology, and which is my major in university, was the corpus callosum. I can't remember how you pronounce it, which connects the two sides of the brain. Sometimes what they have to do with people is cut that if they have severe seizures, and they can't do that. But the problem is when you cut that, you're actually stopping the brain from talking to each other. But what they discovered is even though it's cut, the brain still can send messages back and forth, and they don't know how it does that. That probably follows under the category of the plasticity of the brain, but it's, you know, it's kind of interesting. So when you say it's generalized and they do a major lesion that actually separates the brains, it's the messages still can cross over somehow.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. You made me think about the astronaut. I can't remember his name, and he was. They were learning weightlessness in a pool, and somehow his eardrum burst because the pool wasn't that deep. If you're down 20 feet or so, that kind of stuff can happen. It happens to Navy SEALs. They get kicked out of buds, and they have to return to buds the next year after they heal. This guy had been in 2 years. And you can only be in the space program a certain amount of time as an astronaut. And he had 3 years to heal. So at about 2.5 years, and what this means is they understood enough about the brain that if the brain was going to rewire itself so he could hear in that ear, it would happen in about 3 years. And plasticity that Luke was talking about. Lucky for him, the brain did rewire and he was able to hear out of that ear. And that's what the brain does, stuff like that. And we have no idea. We thought for a long time, the plasticity of the brain ended when you're around 21 or so. But we found out that that's just not true. And that's a recent thing that we discovered.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of what we know about the brain, we discover when something goes wrong. And that's the thing. So I guess it was back at the turn of the century. It's a famous story. I don't remember if the guy was on a railroad or something. Anyway, explosion happened. He was lobotomized, and his personality and he survived, obviously, and his personality and everything changed. And so people recognize the frontal lobe has something to do with your social characteristic. And so they learn that way. Schizophrenia is another way that they learn. Dementia and things like that they study. So what they learn is how come stuff is not working. So when they look at a normal brain and they look at a schizophrenic brain, and they see what parts of the brain are not lighting up when they show them the same stimulus, right? And so that's how we really learn about what's happening in the brain. Now, could we program that? I doubt it. But that's not to say we could never program it. It's like Einstein saying that we'll never go faster than the speed of light. Well, we don't know that. With the science we know today, we're saying, yeah, going the speed of light, particles speed up, they become light. You probably can't go faster than that, but we don't know that as a fact. And so the same thing is about this. Today we can't, doesn't mean tomorrow that we won't be able to. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And just to give you a time check, Russell, we are just about halfway through, so you're doing great for time, and we should have good time for questions. So.
Then we'll have lots of time for questions then.
Yeah.
So as a conclusion, we've made AI's made a lot of inroads into our lives, particularly with these things, mobile phones, and what we like and what we don't like, the apps we pick. The algorithms, I'm a supply chain guy, the algorithms they write for that to try to do supply and demand better and things like that. By adding more from a business perspective, the entire ecosystem, which is called Industry 4.0. And so I know everybody's not a supply chain person, but what that means is to take in all the inputs in my ecosystem, shipping, how my competitors are doing, the logistics, right down to what's on that truck and how do I organize my workforce to deal with it on that day when those trucks back up to the warehouse so it's not Christmas every day. And so we know what to do with that. That's where my expertise is in looking at this stuff. So not from social perspective, which is the Facebooks, the Googles, and TikTok, and all that other stuff. In fact, I don't even have that app. Another thing I would say about, from a conclusion perspective, and our government in particular, is that, so in Europe, you have GDPR. So which means I can call Facebook in Germany and say, remove all my data from Facebook, or I can do it with Google. I can do it anything and get my data removed, and they have to do it by law. In the United States, that does not exist.
Russell, can I get you to stop sharing your screen so we can have a bigger on that if we're on that?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's because the political will's not there to have it? Is that what it is?
Well, I think it's, I think where money is involved, a lot of things are different.
Right.
I don't think, so they're going to go into some of that in the Cambridge Analytica story. But from my perspective, and I had this talk with the university, I'm on the, just for the others, I'm on the board of University of North Texas. And we talked about that. So if we don't, if we're waiting on our Congress to make policy against this, is not going to happen. And there's no will to do it. And then, of course, the Facebooks and the Googles and all those people in the world are not going to do it. They make billions of dollars off this stuff, billions of dollars. So what would Facebook's comeback be? Well, if you don't want to do this, then Facebook's going to cost you $30 a month. And for all of us that have been getting Facebook for free, it's going to go, oh, I don't want to do that. And so that, to me, lies the conflict. Being a boomer, I probably would. So in the boomers, people who I think is from 1940 something to 1960 that were born.
No, they moved the yardstick. I wasn't a boomer, then I became a boomer overnight. It was just like, what? I was like, right at, and I'm more than 63, so it's 64, 65s, but I wasn't, and now I am, and I'm just.
Yeah, so at any rate, I think I actually would pay for Facebook to get my data out of there. Boomers tend to not like their data being publicized anywhere. And millennials, and I'm saying millennials is like boomers. My children are older millennials in the 35, and they're different than the 20-something millennials, just like boomers. I'm in the younger boomer, and the older boomers have already retired. And so there are differences there. But generally speaking, the 20-something millennials don't give a crap, obviously. If the government will tell them that TikTok could be potentially dangerous, this information by law goes back to the Chinese government, but they have more than 4 billion TikTokers. Well, what does that tell you? They don't care.
Right.
So, but I care.
Right.
Yes, I see a hand up.
Yeah, well, Minister Baines is reviewing currently our entire privacy laws, and apparently they're going to have a little bit more teeth to them. And I think they are kind of inspiring themselves from GDPR in Europe, which is a good thing. This is a topic that's very, very near and dear to my heart, because those of us who've been in the field and close to Silicon Valley, and because I'm a startup founder, I'm also close to Silicon Valley, we've known for years that all of these platforms are extremely addictive and poorly built, and the data, the handling and the governance on the data has been crap. I have no respect whatsoever for Zuckerberg, none. Dorsey at Twitter, none whatsoever. Okay, with all due respect, I think they're starting to feel their feet to the fire. They did have a hearing this week, I think, with the US Congress. Well, how much of it is going to go somewhere because of the interim period between the buffoon in the White House and Joe Biden? Oh, and sometimes I'm even cruder than that, is because I know you're from the US. But I know,
Jay,
I
listen,
know.
tell us what you really think.
Well, my terminology is as follows: the spray tanned, blonde-dyed hair, orange buffoon in the White House.
Okay.
But Biden is also very much aware of the impact of basically what they did. But the good news is, and I read that actually this morning, is that for the first time, Facebook presented how many accounts and how many hate speech they've grasped on their platform and how many accounts that they've closed or with warnings, because I think they have some sort of, I think it's 2 warnings, and then if you don't listen, then they close your account. So they're starting to see it. Why? Because from an algorithm perspective, you're just, you're creating societal issues,
Yeah.
from the get-go, let alone, on the purchasing side, the advertising and so on. But I fully agree with you, Russell, that if people understand the brain, then we're also better equipped to understand the impact of those platforms and the impacts that they have on the brain. So, and I think that's also part of the battle. I think
Yeah.
we're getting there. I just think our governments are a bit too slow to
Yeah.
react.
And our polarizing politics is going to make it even slower.
Yeah, in your case, I agree.
That was great commentary. So from an ethical standpoint and where AI is concerned for me, I have kids, I have grandkids. One of my sons doesn't even use Facebook, and the other one is on it very little. And I know they said the younger generation, I don't know what they're calling Z, I guess, does a lot of that TikTok stuff and all that other thing. And that, and I don't know if there's just no governance in the United States for that kind of thing. And so, so we could talk about machines. There's a TV show on called Next, where that's a much more likely scenario about a machine getting out, because it's about software. And that's a more likely scenario than an actual robot running around killing people, and a much more dangerous scenario. And the fact that, so let me cap this off with, and I would love feedback, is that Stanford and another university they mentioned in Social Dilemma is teaching these things to their students on how to do this and create these algorithms that manipulate you. And here's the thing, you can know this is happening and you cannot stop it. The only way you can stop it is to get off the platform.
One of the things that in the movie, they interviewed all the people that were prepared to actually go on the record, and one guy says, I've been going back and forth with lawyers for 8 years on what I can say on this.
Yeah.
And they all talk about the fact what they know it, but they still cannot stop themselves from doing it. I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, and Russell's been encouraging me for weeks to watch it. And I said, is it kid safe? He goes, oh yeah. And so I watched it with him on that. And it was really quite remarkable about, the fact that this is going on and they're able to do it and they're effective. And the people that designed it, one guy said, I had to write an algorithm to stop it coming my way because I couldn't stop myself. And that was the most compelling. The people that created it are the ones that are saying, I'm addicted to it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Do we have any, I put in the link, Russell's, in the chat, Russell's LinkedIn connection, and also you can go to his website, ePrethium Solutions is also in the chat there. I'm wondering if there are questions from anyone that would like to unmute and just ask them now, because you don't want me reading from the chat. You really don't. So. Because I have questions, but I will, it may be my show, but it doesn't mean I get to
there's Chris.
Okay, Chris.
Hi, first of all, I didn't want to, first of all, I am actually a Stanford alumni, by the way, but I did not take Well, I actually did take, they had neural networks at Stanford. That is what I took, among other courses. But I have a question for Russell. Have you seen like any, like either ASICs or FPGAs, GPUs, that special computing power that can help with AI? And also, have you seen like the Apple M1 chip as a new chip? Looks like it's much more underground. I don't know if the Apple M1 might be able to help with AI as well.
We're getting a lot of static on your line there, Chris. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. So, Russell, did you catch all those questions?
I think so.
Okay.
And then, if I don't answer everything, Chris, just come back to me. So, yeah. So, computer power, just in general, a general commentary is that Moore's law, which he didn't intend it to be a law. He was one of the founders of Intel. And so he said every 18 months, the number of transistors will double on a chip, right? So that means it gets smaller and smaller until finally they were expecting Moore's law to run out at some point, and it will. There are physical limits to how close you can put electrons together to transport on a chip. And so we're getting there. So with Moore's law, and the smaller and the faster the chips are getting, and so I don't know about the new chip you're talking about, but just in general, so you've got the small footprint and the transmission of data closer together, which makes them 2, 3, I think the new chip is 10 times faster than the last one, I think. And then with the, a GPU, for those that aren't in computers, is a logical processor now done on video cards that are very powerful. So you can have parallel processing essentially, even though you may have one physical chip. Now it gets a lot more complicated than that. I can have a physical chip that has 4 cores that does a lot of the same things, and I can have on my video card GPUs that does a lot of mass processing. And a lot of it, if you look at some of these video games, so I'm not a gamer, but when my kids come home for Christmas or I go to their house and watch my kids and my grandkids play those games, they boggle my mind of what they can do in a video game and how realistic that stuff looks and the processing power it takes to do that. So yes, stuff is getting faster, but faster, and where AI is concerned, machines will be and already are faster than humans in a lot of different areas. But undertaking that speed and thinking about or engineering into that, and maybe this isn't your question, Chris. So let me back up and talk about what Chris is talking about in terms of a neural network. So in general, a neural network is supposed to be a computer representation of the brain. So it has these different nodes in there. And so the nodes connect like neurons and stuff like that, sort of. But they're really mathematical calculations that when you train it, the math changes a little each time. And so with that and with deep learning, which is a lot of what they use it for, or problem solving, in that we used it in the early 90s to work on a problem called churn. I think I mentioned this on Monday, Chris. So I know you heard this before, so I don't want to repeat. But just in general, we trained the data so it could recognize churn on its own. So churn, for people that don't know what that is people coming and going from long distance. Back then in those days, long distance was a big deal and it cost a lot of money. And so people were always going from AT&T to MCI. That's right, I said MCI because there was no Verizon back then. And Sprint, and going back and forth, whoever was doing the best offer of the day. So that was churn. So we were trying to figure out, how can we stop that? How do we keep people from churning? Are there indicators associated with somebody's getting ready to churn? And so that's what we knew a neural network for. So we use tons of data. But back in those days, what Chris is pointing out is we didn't have the processing power. It took weeks to train with the amount of data. So what Chris is saying, with the new chips and the small footprint and with GPUs, what could take weeks now is in seconds. So that's the big difference in processing power. Now, are there certain things we can apply that to, and we have applied it to, that makes us better? Yes. Cancer, melanoma on the face. A computer, Watson has already done this, as a matter of fact, can spot a melanoma on somebody's face 95% of the time accurately, on anyone's face. A doctor is 75% accurate. So there's one example where, yeah, a machine is much better at doing that. X-rays are the same thing. They can spot breast cancer a lot faster than a doctor can by looking through those other images, because it can look at millions of images and be trained on that. So from a medical standpoint, there's a lot of benefits that we can get from these things. So along those lines, we will get those benefits. Along whether we're, if we're thinking about Go and chess, remember those are algorithms. The thing just is programs 10,000 moves ahead of anyone else. And that's all it is. It's the same thing over and over again. Go is the same way. Once you teach it how to do Go, it's just an algorithm. It's not thinking about anything. And so coming to a terminator that learns to conceptualize, or data, we're nowhere near that. And so that's my comment. So Chris, if you could come back on and see if I was anywhere near answering your question.
Yes, thank you.
Big thumbs up. Who else has? Oh, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
So I should have clarified the Apple M. I think it's the M1 chip, if I'm not mistaken. So I think people have. I think everyone has heard that Apple is starting to switch from Intel to ARM, and the M1 chip, if I'm not mistaken, is basically ARM, but they've mixed together like GPUs and memory and a bunch of other stuff. And I think I think they've distributed memory, if I'm not mistaken, from what I'm just going from memory, my own memory, that it looks like it made such a huge improvement in building chips that they're it's like I think it's really effectively like a better iPad Pro is what they're making in the chip.
So I just read that the other day, as a matter of fact. So I have a Mac and it's the i9, but the model after this one, I think, has the new chip. I'm not sure if it's the one you're talking about, but it has a newer, 10 times faster than the chip that I'm running right now. But there are other types of computing paradigms out there. Quantum computing is an example. The problem with quantum computing, it runs so hot that they have to keep it in absolute zero. And so there's only a few of these things on this planet. So yes, very fast, but very hot. And I think IBM, along with the government, have one. Here's the cool part. If you have a particular use case for a quantum computer, you can apply to use a time slice of that computer. Really? I didn't know if anyone knew that. I was absolutely blown away by that.
What's the motivation? What's the motivation for them to do that?
I don't know the answer. I was watching one of the IBM guys. He was a fellow. So a fellow at IBM is just like being a PhD at a university. They're as high as you can get technical engineering wise. And he was talking about that, and he says, and then he gave the URL, and he said, you can submit your use case here. We will evaluate it, and if we like it, we'll give you a time slice.
Wow.
Yeah, that's.
I wonder if it gives them the opportunity to look at different problems in a way that they never would have thought of, or solve different applications or stuff like that.
So, and when I was at Boeing, another advancement would be, and I don't know who's working on this, is that so we know we're limited to from a binary sense of talking to a computer is a 1 or 0, right? It's on, it's off, and that there are many things, hex, ASCII, and stuff like that, that translate to A, B's, and C's, and numbers and whatnot. So one of the other things they're experimenting with is, why are we using only one spectrum of light? What if we were to use other spectrums of light, like you see in a prism, so you can represent something in more than just zeros and ones?
Huh.
So I don't know what that means, but that could mean a whole game-changing conceptual thing. If you can represent data in that fashion. So that made my head blow up. So I don't know if they're any closer than that. We were just talking when so for those you don't know, I worked at Boeing for 11 years, and we were up talking about grand ideas and all that stuff. And now that Boeing that I work for is a completely different company today. And they've, as you've known for the last year and a half or so, there's nothing more important than getting the MAX off the ground, which happened yesterday.
Yep.
Oh, did it? Oh, really?
Yes, it was approved by the FAA yesterday.
Yep.
Wow.
Finally.
Well, hopefully they fix the problem and there's no more deaths.
Yeah, well, there's always going to be plane crashes, but you're right. Not from the software, which was AI based, by the way.
Correct.
And not from lack of training.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not, by the way, not approved here in Canada yet. Marc Garneau is stepping back because of some of the ethical issues with the FAA.
I wouldn't be surprised. I bet you each country is probably going to do it differently, or
Yeah.
approve it on their
Yeah.
own timetable,
Yeah.
not just on the FAA's timetable.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are not airplane people, the FAA doesn't have enough evaluators. So this is how the Boeing slipped through, the 737 MAX. They don't have enough evaluators. And so sometimes they let them evaluate themselves and then give the FAA the things that they've done. So this plane is airworthy.
I bet you Boeing has wished that they never evaluated themselves in the first place on this one.
Yeah, on this one.
Yeah.
Lots of people lost their jobs.
Do you think, go ahead,
Scott. So I guess the U.S. will be a guinea pig, and the other countries will wait and see how we do on it.
That's potentially true. Yes, I know.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, Americans going to put theirs back in the air next month.
Yeah.
I was going to say, to me, the MAX is a high capacity. I mean, the thing is it needed right now? Nobody's flying.
Well, right. Excellent. Well, yeah.
So here's the thing. You got to remember, Delta's the only one not selling the middle seat. And here's the aerospace, or at least carrier business in a nutshell: butts in seats. That's the business, period. Because once that plane takes off, that revenue is gone forever. It's like a hotel room at night. So it's about butts and seats. So they're going to pack as many people on those 737 MAX as they can get on there. I guarantee you. And if I would fly Delta, because you don't have anyone in between. In a COVID world, I don't want anyone sitting next to me. But I think there was an article that came out about.
Well, I'd fly Delta if I had a choice, no matter what.
Yeah, so and so if you do fly Delta, though, remember they're flying the 87 in the United States, and they were the first one to do that. So if I was going to fly a Boeing plane, I would love to fly. I've never flown on an 87. That's the new wide body with the big windows like this. It has electrical current coming through it that dims and darkens the windows and all that stuff. And there's so much computer stuff on that airplane that, and it's, when you go into the bathroom, and particularly I'm talking to you, Luke, and you're ducking to get in there, that's not going to happen on 87.
No kidding.
The roof is like right up here.
Well, I mean, in a way, people don't see me, but I'll be honest. I'm 6'4", but 400 pounds.
So then
So
you ducked a lot on airplanes.
And the last time I flew was in 2012. We had to go to a wedding down in Florida. Long story short, it's right when my dad passed, so I had to rebook and all. But my son was 6 months old, and we didn't need a seat for him, but legally, but safety-wise, we felt more comfortable getting a seat for him. Plus, figuring I'm a big guy, I figure I could use the extra room. And actually, I don't know what point the airline starts making big people get another extra seat.
Yeah, I don't know either.
And
That's a mystery.
we actually just had to fly to Atlanta and then drove because I had to change flights, but we were supposed to be on the smaller plane from Atlanta to Florida, but I had to reschedule everything. But yeah, so I don't know. And I was a bit smaller back then, so I haven't flown since, and I hate to see what they will try charging me for nowadays. But
The one thing I will say about the 737 MAX, the FAA pilot flew it himself. So if he's willing to put his life on the line, but he's going to say the politically correct thing. He came out and says, "Yeah, I would let my family fly on this." Of course, he just flew it. He just certified it. Of course, he's going to say that.
That's right. That's right. And not as if there's no pressure for that to move this along. Imagine the lobbyists, how much money they have for lobbyists for this.
Mhm.
So
Couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
So the other point I'll make is that AI is very pervasive. And so the basic weak AI is going to be in more and more stuff. Today, what you can do now, and so remember, this is not my field, so I'm going to generalize here, is that I can be at home, and if I have all chips in my lights and on my stove and in my refrigerator and all that stuff, I'm going to say, turn the lights on at 6 when I'm talking to Siri or Alexa, right? And I got to quit doing that because it's going to wake up and hear me and try to talk to me. Turn the oven on to 425 degrees, and the part of the refrigerator that will respond to this start thawing the steak.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff you're going to be able to do, that you can do today, because everything's getting a little IoT chip in it. And you're going to be able to do those things. But at the same time, just remember the target story. The target story where they got hacked was the hacker came across the HVAC systems, the air conditioners, who had the IoT chip in them, and that's how they were hacked.
really.
So for me, I don't have any of that crap on my house. Even my alarm system, I can't use my phone on it because I don't want that. I have the old style door locks and all that stuff. I have cameras that are on the internet, but I don't have any way of accessible from the outside. My garage door even is just a regular garage door opener. It's not one I can do on my phone and all that. So
when I was telling you about on Monday, I guess that call was Monday, about the guy, George Pace.
yes,
That's one of the things I remember the most. We were in a library workshop presentation, and it's a job search group, and he was talking about that. And it's a group of the average age in the room are towards the older side. And he was talking about that, and like they're talking about, and of course people, I mean, you have to balance it because you have the security concerns where somebody can hack in and open doors and everything else. But he's talking like with a fire alarm. If your house is totally wired and there's a fire, what do you think the first thing AI house would do?
I would assume they would call the fire department.
Cut off the HVAC system.
You're kidding, right?
No, eliminate the spread of it.
Oh,
And you figure AI, I mean, you could do that microseconds and then call the police, but in the programming sequence, the first thing actually is to do is cut the HVAC.
So there's less oxygen going to the fire?
Or just cut the spread or whatever.
Oh, I get it. Because if you fan a fire, it gets bigger. I got you.
Because you figure that takes microseconds. A microsecond call to the fire department won't make much of a difference. But nobody in the room knew it. It was like everybody's guessing different things, and nobody guessed it. And I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, I didn't guess right either. That would never even have occurred to me. But so
I hope I was right.
A lot of good
I
things.
remember that correctly, but
A lot of good things with weak AI. People will continue to still work on strong AI. Where I want it to work, so 5G is an enabler of the self-driving car. That's the other thing. I mentioned that on Monday. I'll mention it again here. Is so 4G, I have cell towers. I forgot how far they are apart, but there's several miles between cell towers. 5G, there's going to be, where there were 4, there's going to be 400. So these things are going to be everywhere. Their communication is going to be in sub-second. And so your car is going to be getting a lot of information and sending a lot of information all at the same time. So I actually would look forward, and Dallas traffic is horrific. It may not be as bad as California or New York, but it's terrible. If I could get in the back of my car and work, I'm a workaholic. Now I'm a recovering workaholic. And sit in the back of my car and work while my car takes me someplace, I would do that in a friggin' heartbeat.
You were saying something about Ford owning the information. What was that?
And so GM has come out and stated that this data ownership issue, GM has already stated that the data associated with car, the person who bought the car owns it. Ford is saying they want to be the Facebook of cars. Yep. And that's wrong. Because they want to be a Facebook of cars. Think about that. No, I will never buy a Ford when they do that. I drive that car, I own that data. If I choose to sell that data because I bought the freaking car, then it's up to me to sell it. So when I sign up for Facebook, I get it. But because they sell me the car, they don't own crap as far as I'm concerned. So I just alleviate myself from ever buying a Ford when they get 5G enabled.
And that's going to be, so there's what's the sticking point for you on that, Russell? Privacy issues?
Privacy.
Yeah. So
Another
the fact
question.
is,
I think what they're trying to say, the car will be free. You just get a free ride in a Ford, and then you have to give up your privacy.
Okay, if that's why would they give it away for free? Well, they want the data.
they want the data.
Yep.
Correct.
Another
Not only
question.
that, the cars will carry advertisements inside the panels. So not only, they also catch your eyeballs.
Oh, good grief. It's bad enough that when you watch the Social Dilemma, it's bad enough what they already know about us. This is worse. Mm-hmm. I don't think 1984 Big Brother is even close to the reality we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Welcome to the 2020s. It's going to move into that world, unfortunately, for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't know the whole story about Ford, but that scares me even more.
And if Ford is basically driving you around, protecting your life, I wouldn't drive a Ford to begin with if they're protecting you based upon their reputation of fixed or repair daily or any of the other acronyms.
Yeah.
And that's a branding issue also on top of that. I'm just noticing the time.
Say something.
Yeah, just in closing, because I'll have to go. We have in Quebec one of the oldest center for cybersecurity dependence in adolescence, so until adulthood. And it's been in existence for 4 or 5 years. So they've done quite a bit of research, and from what they did, we now have other centers in Quebec, and I think some of them are being mimicked across Canada because they're doing amazing work. There's a couple of elements too on the context of the algorithm and giving a darn tablet to a child, which I just get very upset. Whereby, and now as a result of the cyber dependency in adolescence, which basically opens the floodgates for other dependencies as adults. So not only cyber dependencies, but alcohol, porn, whatever. Because once your brain starts to be dependent, it doesn't discriminate as to what I'm going to be dependent upon. So as a result of this, and some pressure made to government, because basically we're creating the future dependent, people who will have dependencies going forward. And because we have an opioid crisis in Canada, to be honest with you, I don't know in the US, I haven't heard anything.
Same,
Okay.
same.
Yeah. So that is also pushing, all the social media platform to kind of review all of that. And also because the brain is being developed in adolescence. Okay, so getting back to some of the pure physiological aspects of the brain. So there is going to be a pushback. The issue is that it's going to take time. And the ones that are, pardon my expression, already dependent, you have to undo that. But at least there's an awareness about, first of all, at what age should we be giving a tablet to a child? And what are the implications of not monitoring that, limiting the hours. And just in closing, I was reading today that just since the pandemic, the fact that kids here in Quebec that are being schooled remotely have longer hours using a tablet. This is only since March or April. We're already seeing an implosion of dependencies. And that's only in 9 months or 7, 8 months of using a tablet for longer hours, because when they were at school, in the school setting, they were not necessarily in front of a tablet for 8, 9 hours. They were using it sporadically, and then they would use it home to do their homework. But now it's basically from 8 in the morning until 8 at night, and we're already seeing the impacts.
And you say tablet, does that matter? Tablet or laptop or computer?
No.
Right, okay, so yeah.
It's the screen thing, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure there was no.
Yeah, no, it's the screen. It's the they've even saw in that center that I'm addressing responses to the colors and the number of pixels in the color. In other words, a brighter red is going to create addiction more than a more subdued red, because there's more pixels into it. Combinations of colors also will create dependencies. Yeah, getting
in
the
other words, I
notifications.
should buy my kids a cheap tablet that doesn't have good graphics.
Yeah, well, where the color not as bright, okay, helps. Why? Because a child is attracted by colors.
That's true.
And responds to colors that he likes. And that's why the notifications are red, because we associate red with emergency, fire department, red, code red. So it's like, oh, there's an emergency. It's all done purposely.
Wow.
In a weird sort of way, I knew someone quite well who spent a lot of time in Louisiana prison, and like we're talking like 5-6 years, and he told me that his something that happens when you're incarcerated for a long period of time, you lose your far vision, because you're just only looking at 6 feet by 6 feet. So your extended vision is gone, and pretty much on top of that. So another example of how the brain how we adapt and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's very disturbing. It's it's kind of hard not to know what the right thing to do is. And I watched The Social Dilemma with my like I said, my 16, my 13-year-old, and at 15 minutes in, my son Alex says he actually was quite angry, because he thought the answer, he says, this is just a group of 60-year-olds making a video about what the problem is. And he was upset because he thought the answer was going to be is that he's going to lose his social media. He's going to lose his iPhone. And so it was like, well, you're going to watch, let's watch the video. You can make comments later, but we have an hour left into it, type of thing. And he updated it. Okay, it's not 6-year-old, it's 40-year-olds doing a video. And I'm going, yeah, because we're concerned. We're
Yeah.
concerned
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at pretty much close to the end of our time on this. I'm just going to see if anyone has any last questions for Russell before we call it another episode of the Here to There show. I mean, sorry, the Widen Your Gaze. I'm got my Mondays and Fridays confused. There is only going to be 2 webinars next week because it is holidays in the United States. We had our Thanksgiving, like we like to spread out our turkeys so they're not so close to each other by easily a month. So it's going to be the Here to There show on Monday, and then on Tuesday I am going to be having ageism and no video interviews on Tuesday. So that will be what we have for next week. So any last questions?
Yeah, I would like to she's on the phone. It's not AI, but more talking about this kids and screen time and everything else. And I mean, it is a fine line because I mean, I know that like Bill Gates and even the top computer guys, kids don't have let their kids on computers.
Nope.
But then, I mean, we've admit we held off. We got them a little later, but since we got it, it's do we want to have World 5 when I'm on a meeting, or do I want it quiet? And my son timed it perfectly. He knew I was on a phone call. He was doing good with Lego. I was on the phone, couldn't object. He came in for the tablet, and to keep it quiet, I just pointed to it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
we don't have the Nintendos or any of the other games that even, I mean, I grew up on the Atari 2600 Nintendo. My friends had it, I never did. But it's like, that's what a lot of, even when the kids get together, they talk about it and everything else. So
Mhm.
even neglecting then affects what they have to talk about with friends and their socialism skills and all that, because then you seem lower class, or even like they don't have anything. Oh, gee, you're a weirdo. You don't play video games, and it's that too. So it's definitely a fine line between the two.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the issue too, and we're having these discussions here in Quebec, and that's also mostly because of Yoshua Benjo and his concern about ethics, is that there will come a time, unfortunately, the pandemic may slow us in doing that, where we are going to have at the curriculum of the education system to teach the kids proper computer utilization and what the impacts are. Okay. In the same fashion that, we teach kids about, proper etiquette, in church setting or whatever the case may be, or, if they start to drive a car, there's a, the code de la route. I can't, my English escapes me. But basically we need to teach the kids, and we need to, because what we've also, I'll make a parenthesis here, what we're also realizing is that once people understand how the algorithm is built, they understand the impact that it can have on them. And then it's a choice and it's a behavior, the same behavior as if, you shouldn't be smoking, or, you should take fresh air and walk or whatever exercise. I'm sorry?
Bullying.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I went to a course, and it was just on my other meeting today about, and I think it was the other meeting and not this one, but the one guy was about to quit Facebook as soon as he heard how a teenager can commit suicide if
Yep.
they don't get enough likes on Facebook.
correct.
Right.
I know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't
The
here,
kids
but
don't
I
escape it like they used to.
Yeah. So there's an education to do. I know that
That's
here,
right, yeah.
again, because of Yoshua Benjo, at university level, in some of the classes, like in data science, artificial intelligence, they're also teaching the university, but mostly they're at master's or PhD, but they're also teaching the students on the bad side of,
Right.
okay, from an ethical perspective. But it's not at large, and to avoid the dependency, we need to start earlier.
Well, and I think it falls under the category of because we can, should we?
Right.
right? And that's what it is, because we do it because we can. And then the
Yeah.
question is, on that. I am going to call this installment of Widen Your Gaze to a close. Russell Douglas, thank you very much for taking your time
pleasure.
out of your busy schedule
Thank
to
you.
be here doing this today. And I really enjoy the engagement, and I hope you guys all have a great meeting. Russell, I'm going to get you to hang on, so we're going to just debrief this. And as I say, you don't have to leave your house, but you can't stay in this room. So thanks a lot, and you guys
Cute.
take care.
Have a
Take
good
care.
weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Fine. Are you still recording?
Uh,